Recently, I climbed into my time machine and sat in on the Constitutional Convention at Philadelphia in 1787. I saw a few familiar faces and lots of unfamiliar ones. They were all very busy, looking very serious, reading, talking, debating, and sweating. I wanted to shake hands with many of them, like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and James Madison, but of course it doesn't work that way with time machines. Here are some of the highlights of what I saw and heard. By time machine, I mean Madison's meticulous notes on the debates during the convention. By climbed in, I mean I opened a book and read Madison's notes. By highlights, I mean selected excerpts, paraphrased using today's lingo. If you are a historian or constitutional scholar, this might cause wailing and gnashing of teeth. But for non-purists, the idea is to capture the essence of the convention in an entertaining and informative way. It's always better to study original sources like Madison's notes for yourself, but not everyone has the time for that, or the patience, since Madison is not exactly an easy read, partly because of the language of that time, and partly because he is such a brainiac. So I've tried to make the process much easier and faster for you, and I hope you'll think it was worth the time. There is some very interesting stuff here, and I guarantee you will find a few surprises or your money cheerfully refunded. Parts of it were a bit difficult to interpret, but I think this is a fairly accurate portrayal of what was said and the tone of the discussions.
The states, most of them, sent delegates to the convention to fix the Articles of Confederation. It was clear to almost all by then that the Articles just weren't good enough to effectively manage the affairs of the young America. There wasn't much agreement about what exactly should be done, but obviously something had to be done quickly. The delegates were sent to Philadelphia to come up with ideas, sort out the details, put it all in writing, and present the states with a new and improved set of articles. But even before the convention started, some of the delegates, James Madison in particular, realized that the only way to get the job done was to scrap the articles completely and start over. That didn't go over too well with some of the other delegates, who reminded their colleagues that they had no authority to do that under the terms of the articles, and that's certainly not what the states had in mind by sending them to the convention. But by June 13, 1787, they had reached agreement on a number of issues, largely endorsing what we know as the Virginia Plan. As a result, the national government was much stronger than it had been under the Articles. There wasn't much argument with that, since a weak national government was the key problem with the Articles. But there had also been a big change in how the states figured into the new scheme of things, and the smaller states were not happy. Under the Articles, each state had one vote in Congress, but under the new system decisions would be made by representatives elected by the people. Some delegates were afraid that big states like Virginia would always get their way, no matter how unfair it might be to little states like Delaware. So, on June 15, the convention began to consider an alternative, known as the New Jersey Plan. It preserved equality of the states in Congress, and it was generally an attempt to spruce up the Articles instead of dumping them. The debate was intense until Benjamin Franklin and William Samuel Johnson suggested a compromise on July 5th. On July 16th, the Great Compromise was approved, providing for two houses of Congress, the House, based on popular vote, and the Senate, with equal power among the states. On July 26, the convention appointed a committee of detail to sort out what had been settled so far and to make recommendations on what to do about the still unresolved issues. Their report, presented on August 6, started to look like what we know as the Constitution. But there was still a lot of work to do. For over a month, the delegates debated the draft, bit by bit, settling their differences on most issues. They still couldn't come to an agreement, though, on several points. Executive powers such as veto, the executive department's relationship with the Senate, such as appointments and treaties, and how the executive would be elected. On September 10th, the convention's work was turned over to the Committee on Arrangement and Style. Gouverneur Morris is credited with a final draft of the Constitution. After changing a few details, his work was unanimously approved by the states present, and it was submitted to the Confederation Congress and to the people of the states. That doesn't mean, however, that there was unanimous agreement among the delegates. In particular, Edmund Randolph and George Mason of Virginia and Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts did not approve of the new Constitution. Their objections, primarily the scope of powers given the new federal government, largely reflected the anti-federalist arguments during the ratification debates.
Gentlemen, it looks like it's up to me to get things started, even though most of you are more experienced and wiser. Obviously, we have a very difficult job ahead of us if we are to disappoint those who have been predicting America's failure. As I see it, we have 4 main questions to answer. 1, what characteristics should our national government possess? 2, what's wrong with the present government system? 3, what dangers do we face in our current situation? 4, what should we do about them? First, we need a national government that 1, protects us against foreign invasion. 2, provides a way of dealing with disagreements among the states. 3, deals effectively with matters that the states by themselves aren't equipped to handle. 4, is strong enough to avoid being dominated by state governments. 5, has higher authority than the states. Second, let me start by saying that I mean no disrespect at all toward the men who wrote the Articles of Confederation. They did all that could reasonably be expected of them at that time. It's important to keep in mind that the country was in its infancy then, and they weren't faced with the problems we face today, like commercial squabbles among the states, purchasing the materials and supplies needed for the country, rebellions, like the one in Massachusetts, urgent foreign debts, all the problems associated with printing paper money, treaty violations, etc. With that in mind, here are what I consider to be the defects in the Articles of Confederation. 1, it doesn't provide for security against foreign invasion, and there are many examples of this. 2, the national government has insufficient authority to deal effectively with quarrels among the states or rebellion within them. 3, there are a lot of benefits that a stronger national government could provide, including better trading terms with foreign countries. For the national government cannot defend itself against state encroachments. 5, the current federal constitution is superseded by state constitutions. Third, we are on the brink of anarchy. Enough said. 4th, here are my proposed solutions to the problems I have just described. The Articles of Confederation will be expanded and revised so that they provide adequately for our national defense and security and general welfare. Voting rights for members of the national legislature will be based on population, either landholders only or all free people, whichever each state prefers. The national legislature will consist of 2 branches. The first branch will be elected by the people in each state, and elections will be held at specified intervals, with members serving a term of a specified number of years. Members will be at least a specified age. They will receive compensation for their services. Members will be prohibited from serving in any state office or other federal position during their term or for a specified number of years after their term ends. Members will not be eligible for re-election for a specified number of years, and they will be subject to recall. The second branch will consist of members nominated by their respective state legislatures and then elected by members of the first branch. Members will be subject to specified age requirements. They will serve for a specified number of years, which should be sufficient to assure their independence. They will be compensated for their services. They will be prohibited from holding any state or other federal office during their term, or for a specified period afterward. The national legislature will retain all legislative rights and powers now provided by the Articles of Confederation. In addition, it will have the power to pass whatever laws, which may originate in either branch, are necessary to ensure harmony among the states, and to address issues which the individual states are not equipped to handle effectively. It will have veto power over state laws which conflict with national laws, in the opinion of the national legislature, and it will have authority to use force if necessary to assure state compliance with national laws. A national executive will be elected by the national legislature, serving for a specified number of years. He will be compensated for his services, a fixed amount which cannot be increased or decreased during his term. He will be eligible for re-election. He will assume all executive rights now vested in Congress under the Articles of Confederation, and he will have the general authority to execute national laws. A council of revision will be established, consisting of the executive and an appropriate number of members of the national judiciary. The council will have authority to examine every law passed by the national legislature before said law goes into effect. Any law rejected by the council will be null and void unless it is passed again by the legislature. In that case, the council will have authority to again examine it and perhaps veto it. A national judiciary will be established, consisting of one or more supreme courts and of inferior courts. Judges will be chosen by the national legislature with life terms, and they will receive fixed compensation for their services. Any increase or decrease in said compensation will not affect any member in office at the time such decision is made. Jurisdiction will be: a provision will be made, subject to legislative approval, for the admission of new states into the Union. A Republican form of government will be guaranteed by the national government to each state in the Union. Provisions will be made for continuing to operate under the Articles of Confederation until such time as these reforms are adopted. Provisions will be made for amending the new Constitution, and the consent of the national legislature will not be required. Each state's legislative, executive, and judicial powers must be modified as necessary to conform to the new national Constitution, and each state will be bound by oath to support it. Each state will form a state convention, consisting of delegates recommended by the state legislature and elected by the people, to consider the proposals adopted here after they are submitted to the current Congress and referred by it to the states. Thank you for your consideration, gentlemen. I need not remind you that we cannot afford to waste this opportunity to improve our system of government and to establish a new era of peace, harmony, happiness, and liberty in America.